Poughkeepsie, New York, quaint and peaceful.
She's living the perfect life with the perfect family, in the perfect house, in the perfect town.
But all that ends tonight.
They were watching her. She was being watched.
A triangle of illicit passion with suspects and surprises at every twist and turn.
The number one suspect is always the other spouse.
In this town, a soul can be bought cheap. But when the bribe money runs out, someone still has to pay. Poughkeepsie, known as the Queen City of the Hudson, hugs the Hudson River and lies 75 miles north of New York City, in the seat of Dutchess County.
Pleasant Valley, New York it's right over the border of Connecticut in the corner of the state. Pleasant Valley I would describe much like the name, Pleasant. Although New York is not New England, it is a quaint New England type of sleepy town.
Rich in history, it's where the U.S. Constitution is ratified in 1788, and New York becomes the 11th colony to join together as the United States of America. Poughkeepsie is a vigorous hybrid of rural, urban, suburban, working class, and Ivy League.
It's very homey, it's very community-oriented, and the people are all friendly. I mean, you have robberies, you have drug-related crimes, but the one thing you don't see in Pleasant Valley is murder.
It's October 28th, 1999. Church choir practice at the Pleasant Valley United Methodist Church in Poughkeepsie finishes up for the night, and the friends say their goodnights.
It's a white church. The parking lot is across the street. And Susan comes out of choir practice. She's talking with a friend. And she walks across the street, waves goodbye to her friend. Other people are getting into the cars. She gets into her car and she sits down.
They were watching her. She was being watched.
As she puts her seatbelt buckle on, all of a sudden, 6 shots are fired into her. And these are basically at point blank range.
Started firing, just kept firing a gun at the car.
As people from choir practice are beginning to see what's going on, they run to the car, they go in, they dial 911, state police arrive, local police arrive, EMTs arrive, and Susan Fassett is still alive.
Susan Fassett is a farmer's daughter, a tall, attractive blonde, age 48. She's a slim and fit mother of 2 who lives with her husband and children in the town of Pleasant Valley. This part of Dutchess County is rapidly developing from working farms to sprawling malls. Susan is passionate about raising her family.
She took the kids everywhere. Yankee games, Catskills, on vacations, skiing. They went and did everything together.
As well as a devoted mother, she's a busy professional, employed by the city of Poughkeepsie.
She worked in human resources for the town, so she hired people.
Energetic and engaged with life from early morning till late at night, Susan can be spotted around town driving a flashy, brand new SUV. She participates in fitness classes at the community center, nurtures her family, and supports her place of worship.
She goes to church 3 times a week, Sundays, and then she practices with the choir.
There appears to be nothing special about that Thursday night when, just like everyone else in her choir, Susan Fassett has dinner with her family, and then she leaves for singing rehearsal at the Pleasant Valley United Methodist Church.
On the outside, if you look at Susan Fassett's life, she's living the perfect life with the perfect family, in the perfect house, in the perfect town.
She participates in a normal night of choir practice, an activity she loves.
Susan is at choir practice, and she's singing her heart out, and choir practice ends.
But no one can know. This night is far from normal. Susan Fassett is identified to police by her friends at the scene.
Susan Fassett, she's the wife of the lieutenant in the police department. She's a mother of 2. She works for the town of Poughkeepsie.
There was a pulse. The EMS was there. They treated her. They tried to stabilize her.
And they rush her to the hospital.
Witnesses report that the car parked next to Susan's vehicle takes off at top speed after the shots.
They didn't know what kind of car it was.
A couple of the choir members even give a partial license plate number and describe it as a metallic-covered station wagon. That's pretty distinct. So the state police have things to go on.
Officers search the scene for clues. Susan's friends and choir mates are stunned by the savage attack in the church parking lot.
If that happens, anything is possible.
There were shell casings at the scene. Shell casings at the scene were recovered, collected, and brought to the ballistics laboratory where they were sent for analysis.
As Susan is trying to be saved in the emergency room at the hospital, investigators are rushing to see if they can find this perpetrator. And they run that partial plate and the description of the vehicle.
Very swiftly, the search on the partial plate produces unexpected and ominous results.
And what they come up with is Jeff Fassett, a lieutenant in the police force.
The match is for Susan's husband, Jeff Fassett's car.
The #1 suspect is always the other spouse. 85% of the cases, that's the case. He's a cop, he's a lieutenant, so he can be armed. And they decide to call out their SWAT team. They get the SWAT team and they surround the Fassett home. They're in the woods, hiding in the dark. So Jeff Fassett is at home with his son and his son's girlfriend. In fact, Jason Fassett, the son, and his girlfriend are leaving. And they go back inside the house and they say, "Dad, what's going on? There are cops everywhere, across the street, in the bushes. What's going on?"
Jeff was a police officer, so all these cops that went to his house knew him, and they felt bad.
Jeff Fassett, police lieutenant, and his son and son's girlfriend are surrounded by Jeff Fassett's own police force.
They were having problems, Sue and her husband.
So Jeff Fassett explains, "Yeah, I knew she was having an affair." Inside the ER, Susan is fighting for her life, and she loses that fight.
In a town of the very rich and the very poor, the Fassett family appeared to be regular, upstanding people. But on the night of October 28th, 1999, Susan Fassett is gunned down. Her police lieutenant husband, Jeff Fassett's car, is a match for the speeding getaway car, and their home is surrounded by police.
They're in the woods, hiding in the dark.
Jeff Fassett, police lieutenant, phones his own workplace to find out what's happening to his family.
First thing going through the guy's mind is, what did I do? And if he didn't do nothing, then of course you've got nothing to worry about. Maybe it's a mistaken identity, or that would definitely be going through my mind. Well, what did I do?
But soon, the SWAT team moves in to take down the Fassets.
Jeff Fassett says, "I have no idea what's going on." But no sooner do they do that, does the SWAT team roll in, take Jason and his girlfriend, tackle them to the ground, handcuff them, and then rush into the house and grab Jeff Fassett.
They brought them down to the police station. I heard that it was a very difficult interview.
This crime was in its infancy. It just happened.
Jeff tells them, "I was home all night long."
They go very fast. Get as much information as you can
One of the things that state police do to Jeff Fassett is they give him a polygraph.
Police do not explain to the Fassetts why they're being questioned.
Now here is the horrible part of this. The mother of Jason and the wife of Jeff is fighting for her life as they are being questioned about her potential murder. And they don't even know what happened to her.
And they broke the news to him that his vehicle was involved in a shooting.
Inside the ER, Susan is fighting for her life, and she loses that fight. Susan Fassett dies from those 6 gunshot wounds.
Police now have a murder on their hands. Susan Fassett's body will go to autopsy as the interrogation of the Fassetts continues. Police grill the Fassetts for about 10 hours.
It's only at the end of that interview that they say, the reason why we're doing this is because, your wife, your mother, she's been murdered, she's dead. That's how they find out about Susan Fassett being gunned down during an interrogation.
They asked Jeff if he was involved, and he said absolutely not.
However, its shiny surface of the perfect marriage, all is not well between Jeff and Susan Fassett.
They were having problems, Sue and her husband.
In September 1999, Jeff gets proof of an affair through his wife's phone calls. He confronts her, and she admits the truth. Jeff immediately moves into an apartment attached to their house. The marriage seems like it's over. But in time, they decide to seek help and save their relationship.
Sometimes 20 years go by and people grow apart. And Susan and her husband, they were getting along great, but they just weren't emotionally connected anymore.
Jeff forgives Susan, and they decide to reconcile and renew their vows. In a symbolic gesture, they throw away their old wedding bands and buy new ones.
She wants to reconcile with her husband. She loves her husband. She loves her family. She loves her life. But she's just having maybe a breakdown of some sort.
Jeff Fassett picks up his new wedding band 5 weeks later, on the day Susan is gunned down.
So Jeff Fassett explains, yeah, I knew she was having an affair, but I didn't kill her.
The polygraph results are favorable to Jeff Fassett.
He passes it. I mean, what else does the guy have to say? Not only that, but he's a lieutenant in the police department himself.
It's discovered that there is an early mistake in the case. The license plate reported seen leaving the crime that led them to Jeff Fassett is incorrectly processed.
The confusion about why they went after Jeff Fassett is that dispatch screwed up the license plate numbers and actually gave police Susan Fassett's license plate number. So it looked like Jeff had left that scene and it was all a mistake.
There are more revelations. The autopsy reveals that Susan has had sex within 48 hours. Authorities want to know if that partner was Jeff.
When Jeff Fassett offers up his DNA, he becomes very distraught because he realizes, wow, I didn't sleep with my wife, so that means somebody else did.
Faced with this devastating information, Jeff Fassett tells investigators who they should pick up. He believes he knows the man who is capable of killing Susan.
I know I didn't kill her. Go talk to this guy.
Jeff Fassett gives the police a name.
Everything is happening so fast. You got a victim, they got the plate number, and they inadvertently ran the wrong plate number. But that mistake turned out to give a suspect. So inadvertently, it wasn't a total wash with the wrong plate because the husband gave up Fred Andros, who that could be a prime suspect.
Susan Fassett is gunned down and killed outside of her church choir practice. Her husband, Jeff, tells police their marriage has been rocky due to Susan's affair. Jeff Fassett believes that he and his wife are reconciled, but the autopsy reveals that Susan recently had sex, and it wasn't with him. Jeff Fassett tells police the identity of Susan's affair, the man who he believes is capable of killing Susan. Their affair has been going on for years, and Susan's former lover is a surprise. The individual, a well-known and well-hated person in Poughkeepsie, Fred Andros.
When you mentioned Fred Andros' name, people would immediately go, oh, that guy? Number one, Fred Andros is corrupt as they come.
He is also charismatic, unattractive, and highly promiscuous.
My father wasn't even that good looking, to be honest with you, but things that he said to women, you're beautiful, you look so nice today. Even in restaurants, to waitresses, he'd call them honey, make them feel really good. Thanks for your good job. He'd go over and give them a big tip and then leave a small tip on the table. So he was very much a charmer. And women liked him a lot because he was like that.
You have people that walk in the room, they turn heads, people are looking at, saying, oh, look at this guy. Then you got Fred Andros, comes in and people are looking and turning around, and Fred Andros thinks he's this guy.
Married 4 times, Andros juggles affairs with several women at the same time and indulges in a predilection for prostitutes.
He was with so many women, I can't even count them. And all these affairs were even when he was married, to every wife.
Jeff Fassett believes that his wife's former affair, Fred Andros, is the person police should talk to.
Why don't you go see that Fred Andros? Because that's who she's screwing around with. Now go see him. I know I didn't kill her. Go talk to this guy.
Police act fast on Jeff Fassett's tip.
So they go to his house, 2 o'clock in the morning that night, and bang on his door. And Fred is just, what the hell do you want? No, I'm not answering any of your questions. Fred is very, very abrasive when it comes to law enforcement.
Fred Andros is used to calling the shots.
Fred asks them, why are you even here? Why are you waking me up in the middle of the night? And he's abrasive and he's angry. And then they tell him Susan Fassett has been murdered. And we know you had an affair with her. And Fred actually gets very upset about this, hearing of her death.
Not only is the affair over, Fred also claims that he can prove where he was at the time of the murder.
And then Fred gives them an alibi, because they ask him, where were you? He gives them an alibi.
There's no way he would have done that.
Fred Andros spends 3 decades as water boss for the town of Poughkeepsie, beginning in 1966.
Fred Andros had a reputation in Poughkeepsie, in Pleasant Valley, as this guy that in one way you didn't want to mess with because he controlled the water permits in the town. So if you had anything to do with water, you didn't want to mess with Fred. On the other hand, you mention Fred's name and people be like, that guy? He thinks he's a big shot, but he's a nobody.
He works in a corrupt culture of kickbacks. Fred takes bribes, but they are sanctioned by officials higher up than Fred.
You went to Fred if you were putting in a small strip mall. And you needed the water inspected, the lines, everything, before you could move on. Fred was the type of guy where he'd allow you to lay all the pipes in, say, a 5-acre parking lot. And he'd allow you to start paving it. And then he'd come to you and he'd say, I want $5,000 for myself, or I don't give you the permits for this. Fred's entire life in Poughkeepsie was shaking down people for cash.
He's a small man with a big, nasty reputation.
And what's interesting about Fred Andros is He's kind of disgusting. He's ugly, yet he seemed to get the ladies. And I could never figure out while I was working on this case how that came about because he was so reviled by many people.
Everybody loved him or everybody hated him. So they loved him when they wanted something, and then they started to hate him because of what he became.
The corruption in Poughkeepsie runs high and deep. But now, all of that is crumbling from above, and Fred scrambles to save himself from being crushed. Fred's colleague, the town's property assessor, Basil Rauchi, 55, disappears on October 4th, 1997, after federal agents urge him to testify against county's Republican political boss, Bill Paroli Sr. Paroli is accused of controlling the Poughkeepsie government's shakedown enterprise. Rauchi is soon found, his lifeless body fished out of the Hudson River. Hours after Paroli's arrest, Fred Andros resigns from his 33-year water position and pleads guilty to a federal charge of conspiracy for serving as Paroli's minion.
The FBI comes in, and what the FBI likes to do is look for the weakest link. And the weakest link in this case is Fred Andros, because they know he's a coward. They know if they go to him and they squeeze him, he's gonna say, I'll tell you anything you want, as long as I don't go to jail. He's that guy.
Fred Andros secretly negotiates with the feds to get off easy in exchange for testifying against the big boss Paroli.
He retired, he said, due to medical reasons, but he retired because he was in trouble.
Newly retired, a major federal corruption case looming over him, Fred Andros answers questions about the brutal slaying of his former affair, Susan Fassett.
My father was up all night with police questioning him, investigators questioning him about the death of Susan Fassett.
Fred Andros and his wife hold a dinner party for friends at the time of Susan's murder, so he has an alibi. Police ask Fred if he had sex with Susan Fassett within the last 48 hours. He denies it, adding he's on a medication that renders him impotent. No gun is found in relation to the killing. Without a murder weapon, forensic examiners can only study the ballistic evidence removed from the body of Susan Fassett.
She was shot with a .45 caliber pistol, and one of the bullets actually goes through both carotid arteries. So, I mean, she really didn't have a chance. Fred Andros and Jeff Fassett are cleared, really, with alibis. Both of them were not at that church when Susan Fassett was murdered.
However, the officers have DNA that proves Susan had sex just before her death. They want DNA from both men, Jeff and Fred, to see if someone is lying to them.
When Jeff Fassett offers up his DNA, he becomes very distraught because he realizes, wow, I didn't sleep with my wife, so that means somebody else did. And he thought they were reconciling.
Jeff Fassett's response is very different from that of Fred Andros.
He says, my lawyer says I shouldn't do it, so I gotta listen to him. I wanna help, but I gotta listen to him.
Despite his refusal, officers hatch a plan to retrieve Fred Andros's DNA. The officer stops by Fred's house and invites Fred into his car to talk about the case. He brings Andros fast food, which Fred notoriously loves.
Fred's eating his burger, his fries.
But he isn't touching the soda pop, so the officer acts.
Turned the temperature in the car up as high as it could go. So Fred had to take a sip.
The officer now has Fred's DNA, but will he be able to secure it?
And sure enough, Fred says, I'm out of here. Opens the door, walks away.
Fred leaves the cup behind.
He has a soda with a straw sticking out of it with Fred's DNA on the top of it. He runs that to the lab. There's a match. Fred's DNA inside of Susan Fassett. Fred had slept with Susan Fassett within hours of her murder.
Fred Andros has lied to police about his relationship with Susan Fassett.
So Fred is dragged in and the feds are there.
And they're turning the screws to him. I mean, they must be telling him, listen, This is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. Now he starts to buckle.
Fred Andros breaks down and tells police that it's not him they should be looking at. And the case takes another unexpected turn. Fred tells police they need to investigate someone else, Susan's secret lesbian lover.
Her car is a metallic station wagon.
They asked her about a gun, and she says, yeah, I do have a gun.
They know now they have their shooter.
When family woman Susan Fassett is gunned down outside of her church, police interrogate her lover, a corrupt, reviled former city employee, Fred Andros. Police outwit Andros, who inadvertently gives up a DNA sample, which proves he recently had sex with Susan. But Andros astonishes police when he points them to who he thinks the real killer is, Susan Fassett's secret lesbian lover.
My father eventually said, I think I know who did it. And they said, who? And he said, her first name is Dawn.
Fred Andros tells police that he engages in threesomes with Susan and her lover, and they need to look to Dawn Silvernail in Susan's death, who had the motive of jealousy. Fred has a 20-year friendship with Dawn Silvernail. They initially meet on Citizens Band Radio, a shared hobby.
My father, his CV handle was Neptune.
A fitting name given his role in the city's water department.
He surely was acting like it. Like as a strong-arming people pay up where you get no water.
So on the CB radio, you had a handle. For Dawn, it was Delta Dawn. That's what she called herself over the airwaves. And what you did is you knew people without knowing them. So you spoke to them on the radio, Neptune speaking to Delta Dawn, but you don't really know who each other are as people.
But Delta Dawn and Neptune are soon to meet.
Dawn Silvernail, tall gal, very tall among her peers, among her friends, among her community. One of the quirky things about Dawn is she moonlighted as a country singer.
When we met her, she was a very, very beautiful woman. She had long blonde hair.
Dawn and Fred initially met when Fred took his wife out one night to see Dawn sing at a country bar. And here's that meeting. I'm Delta Dawn, you're Neptune? Wow. This is your wife? Wow.
And my father just got caught up with her and started having an affair.
But it doesn't last long sexually. The friendship lasts a lot longer.
Dawn meets Ed Silvernail, falls in love, and gets married.
Dawn put an end to it. She said, Fred, I'm not sleeping with you no more. I love Ed. I have a home with Ed. He's a good man, and I'm not doing that to him.
She didn't seem like she would be the kind of person that would have an affair.
Police are suspicious of Fred's story.
I mean, this doesn't make sense. Susan was not a lesbian. Dawn, they can find no evidence of her being a lesbian, so there was no lesbian affair. What motive would Dawn have to kill Susan Fassett when they don't even know each other?
Despite their doubts, authorities do their due diligence and look up Dawn Silvernail in the system.
She's got a 45 that she registered, and her car is a metallic colored station wagon. So this looks like that Dawn Silvernail was parked next to Susan Fassett that night, fired those shots, killed her, and drove away.
Police pay Dawn Silvernail a visit.
They asked her about a gun, and she says, yeah, I do have a gun. And she gives it right up. She gives the gun right up to him. It's kind of strange. Without any warrant, without any, contesting, she gives the gun right up.
They take Dawn's gun in for forensic testing. When they do the ballistics and they realize the gun has been cored out, That means the barrel of the gun has just been drilled out, where you can't match the striations on the bullet to the striations now on the barrel of the gun, which is almost like a fingerprint.
Pouring out a gun would be basically altering the ballistics. The marks that are in that gun, you're changing them now, or you're removing them.
Somebody tampered with that gun for a reason.
So what comes to mind is that she figures, well, the gun's been altered, I'll give you the gun right up, it's not gonna tell you anything.
Unlikely or not, authorities now believe that Don Silvernail is the shooter. But with a tampered murder weapon, they are unable to prove their suspicions until one of the officers makes a connection.
This is when one of the detectives says, hey, I noticed the tree in the back. They were taking target practice back there with that gun. So maybe they were taking target practice before the barrel was cored out.
Authorities go to Don's backyard.
And there were still bullets in the tree.
They are able to pry a bullet out of the tree and test it against the bullets taken from Susan Fassett's body.
And they find out that's the gun that shot both bullets, the one from the tree and the one in Susan Fassett's body. They know now they have their shooter, and that shooter's Don Silvernail. As the investigation leads to Don Silvernail, things start falling into place.
And Don Silvernail starts to crack.
They were there a couple of hours, and she broke down and said, I didn't do this on my own.
She begins to tell this story now of an elaborate plan by none other than her old friend, Fred Andros.
And I did it by his instruction.
Dawn tells police she only commits the murder because Fred holds something awful over her.
One of the things that Dawn talks about is he showed me pictures taken like stealthily from afar of my son at work, at home.
If you don't do this for me, I'm gonna release these pictures, and now something may happen to your son.
Dawn owes Fred Andros money, and Fred uses that power over Dawn.
Dawn has been coming to Fred now for a while, asking him for money, to borrow money again. And he's lending her money. But Fred gets an idea. He says, Dawn, this is what I want you to do. I want you to sleep with my girlfriend, and I want to watch. So Fred wants Dawn to sleep with the woman he's having an affair with, Susan Fassett. He wants them two to get together so he can watch it and he can videotape it. That was his game. I'm gonna get stuff on you, and I'm gonna get you to do something for me. Whether it's give me money, whether it's fix something for me, or whether it's murder. I'm gonna get you to do something for me, and you're gonna do it. That was Fred Andros.
When Dawn tells the truth, Fred Andros is exposed. Police go to pick up Fred Andros for his role in the killing of Susan Fassett.
So when they came in the house, the one investigator came in the house. He walked around the house to look for him. They were calling Fred, Fred, where are you? We know that you're here.
And then they hear a shot. What happened? So they go up and they find Fred. As cowards like Fred do, he tried to kill himself when the state police were coming for him.
It's a 50-50 shot. Anything is possible when it comes to a gun.
Fred misses making a fatal shot.
He shot off half of his face is what he did.
You got this Fred Andros, who he just basically couldn't do nothing right.
Police call for an ambulance. They want to save Fred Andros' life, so he will face the consequences of his actions. Fred Andros tries to point police to his old friend, Don Silvernail, for the murder of Susan Fassett. But the plan backfires. Although Don confesses, she tells police that Fred blackmails her into carrying out his dirty work. Police rush to pick up Fred, and he shoots himself in the head. but the bullet misses the fatal path.
It was a horrible sight. It was horrible. I felt terrible and sad that he had that much desperation where he thought he had to do that.
So for the next year, Fred is in jail, but he gets like a year's worth of reconstructive surgery on his face to make himself look presentable.
They reconstructed his palate, they reconstructed his nose. He had a different nose, but otherwise he was the same.
In February 2001, Fred Andros stands trial for the murder of Susan Fassett, and Dawn Silvernail is the star witness. She tells a jury of 8 men and 4 women a lurid story of Fred's power over her.
So for Dawn, Fred was kind of this go-to loan shark.
Over the course of their friendship, Fred Andros lends Dawn thousands of dollars. As payment, Fred makes a gift of Dawn Silvernail to men whom he wants to please.
Dawn and my father did have a lengthy relationship that we didn't know about until all this murder thing came out.
He uses the town facilities for his illicit affairs.
I know it happened in one of the pump stations. They had mattresses there, and that's where it happened.
Dawn wasn't involved knowingly in any of this, but what happened was Fred would say to Dawn, take this envelope and deliver it for me and I'll pay you X amount of money. You know, and Dawn is thinking, well, she's delivering documents or whatever, but these are kind of payoffs.
Dawn was the in-between. He would give her money to drop off.
So Dawn is committing crimes, federal crimes, without really knowing it. And this is just one more thing that Fred Andros can hold over Dawn's head.
Dawn is convinced she must kill for Fred, but she is terrified.
Dawn tells this story to the jury about actually stalking Susan. She went to Susan Fassett's house one night, about a week before the murder, dressed in black, with a gun, and she was gonna kill her that night, but she didn't have the nerve.
Dawn said that she tried a couple of times. She went almost to her house. She said she couldn't do it.
But Fred Andros is relentless. He pushes Dawn to the edge, and she finally goes over. Dawn parks beside Susan Fassett's car across from the church.
She put her seat down and waited for Susan to come out. And when Susan came out, she just sat up and she just shot her through the window, didn't even get out of the vehicle.
My father had given Dawn a different plate to put on her car just in case that they spotted the license plate.
Dawn dumps the gun on a county road and pages Fred Andros with a signal that the murder is done. Fred picks up the gun, alters the ballistic imprint by coring the barrel, and then Dawn retrieves it.
He told her that it was all drilled out, not to worry about it.
She gives the entire narrative of everything. And then she says, in tears, I shot that poor woman, I shot that poor woman, I shot that poor woman. But she also points and says, for him, I did it for Fred Andros. He's the one who asked me to do it.
Dawn Silvernail's story is solidly backed up by evidence. On February 23, 2001, Fred Andros is convicted of murder in the 2nd degree and conspiracy in the 1st degree in the County Court of Dutchess County. He is sentenced to 25 years to life on the murder charge and 8 to 25 years on the conspiracy charge.
If they charged him with murder for hire, that's a capital felony in any state. He could have saw the death penalty.
Before she receives her sentence, Dawn Silvernail tearfully apologizes to her own family and to the Fassett family.
And I will say, in 45 books I've written about murderers, Dawn is the only one who had remorse, admitted to everything to me, and was actually sorry about it.
Every day of my father's trial, I would always give him the thumbs up so that he would have it would give him a little lift. And the last day when they convicted him, I didn't give him the thumbs up.
Fred wanted to be like this gangster type.
He rose from a ditch digger to the superintendent. So he wasn't going to get stepped on anymore. He was going to do what he had to do to be powerful and let people know that he was powerful.
Fred's prison term is to run consecutively with the federal prison sentence of 33 months for his part in the corruption scandal.
I felt sorry for my father because my father was such a smart man. He could do anything, and for him to be so smart to be stupid, he thought he was smarter than the cops. He told me once that he was the smartest mother that he knew.
The heinous, sordid case ends. Corruption ringleader Bill Paroli Sr. pleads guilty to one federal count of corruption conspiracy and gets a slap on the wrist, fined just $24,000 and locked up for 18 months. But the question remains, why did Fred have Susan killed?
My father had told Dawn that Susan was going to get him into a lot of trouble because she knew more about the federal case and he didn't want her to spill her guts.
But there's another take on the murder of Susan Fassett, who made the choice to reconcile with her husband just before her killing.
Fred Andros killed Susan Fassett for the oldest motive in the book: revenge. If I can't have you, nobody can. You don't tell me no. You reject me, you die. That's Fred Andros.
Susan Fassett pays the ultimate price for her vulnerability.
I think Dawn and my father both got what they deserved.
They're bad people. They're bad people.
Susan Fassett was just a happy-go-lucky person, kind of hit a roadblock in her life. She had an affair, but are we to judge somebody by having an affair? That wasn't who she was. It was something she did. She met up with the devil in disguise.